The Pentagon's E-ring corridor stretched endlessly before Lieutenant Elena Morales, its polished floors reflecting the harsh fluorescent lights that never dimmed, not even at 5:47 a.m. She adjusted her uniform for the third time, aware that every detail mattered in this fortress of judgment. "Coffee's in the break room, rookie," senior analyst Tom Bradford called out as she passed his desk, not bothering to look up from his monitors. "2 sugars, no cream, thanks." Elena paused, her jaw tightening. 3 months into her assignment at the Defense Intelligence Agency's Tactical Analysis Unit, and she was still the coffee runner, the note-taker, the invisible presence in meetings where her voice was drowned out before she could finish a sentence. "I'm reviewing the Baltic shipping reports," she replied evenly. "Perhaps Agent Chen could assist with the coffee run today?" Bradford's chair creaked as he swiveled to face her, his weathered face creasing into a condescending smile. "Baltic shipping reports? That's level 3 clearance work. Stick to the daily briefs, Morales. We've got systems in place here. Systems that have worked since before you were in high school." The tactical analysis room hummed with activity as other analysts filtered in. Elena settled at her corner workstation, the smallest desk with the oldest equipment, positioned where the air conditioning barely reached. Washington, D.C.'s humid August morning was already seeping through the building's ancient ventilation system. "Hey, rookie!" Another voice, Agent Derek Sullivan, 6 years her senior, and never letting her forget it. Division Chief wants the threat assessment matrices printed and bound, color-coded tabs. You know the drill. Elena's fingers hovered over her keyboard. On her screen, a pattern was emerging from the shipping data she'd been analyzing for weeks during her unofficial overtime. Container movements through Rotterdam, Singapore, and Long Beach that didn't match their manifests. Financial transfers routing through shell companies in Cyprus. Small anomalies that, viewed separately, meant nothing. But Elena had always seen the world differently. Where others saw random data points, she saw constellations. "Morales, those reports won't print themselves." Sullivan's voice carried that particular brand of impatience reserved for those deemed beneath notice. She minimized her analysis window and stood, her mother's words echoing in her mind. "Mija, sometimes you have to play their game before you can change the rules." In the print room, Elena mechanically assembled the reports while her mind raced through the connections she'd discovered. 3 shipping companies, all registered within the last 18 months. Crew changes that followed no logical pattern. Ports of call that made no commercial sense. "There you are." Division Chief Patricia Hayes entered the print room, her silver hair pulled back in the same severe bun she'd worn for the past decade. "The 9 a.m. briefing has been moved to 8:30. Make sure conference room A is set up. And Morales?" She paused at the door. "Try to be invisible. The Joint Chiefs will be attending and we don't need any disruptions." Disruptions. Code 4, don't speak unless spoken to. And maybe not even then. Elena nodded, swallowing the words she wanted to say. In her pocket, her phone buzzed with an encrypted message from her academy roommate, now stationed in Norfolk. "Hang in there, E. Your time will come." But as Elena watched Hayes disappear down the corridor, she wondered if her time would come before it was too late. The pattern in the data wasn't just suspicious, it was accelerating, and she was the only one who could see it. The morning sun cast long shadows through the Pentagon's narrow windows, painting geometric patterns on the walls. Somewhere in those shadows, Elena knew a threat was taking shape. The question was whether anyone would listen to a rookie analyst before it emerged into the light. She gathered the reports and headed to conference room A, her footsteps echoing in the empty hallway. In 12 hours, everything would change. She just didn't know it yet. Chapter 2. Connecting the Invisible Dots. The Tactical Analysis Unit's night shift was Elena's sanctuary. At 11:47 p.m., with most of the building reduced to skeleton crews and security patrols, she could work without the constant barrage of coffee requests and dismissive glances. She'd been tracking the anomaly for 6 weeks now. Using her access to compile data, no one else bothered to cross-reference. The glow from her 3 monitors painted her face in pale blue light as her fingers flew across the keyboard. "Still here, Morales?" Security Officer James Murphy paused during his rounds, genuine concern in his voice. He was one of the few who treated her like an actual analyst rather than an intern. "Just wrapping up some research," Elena replied, minimizing a window that showed port security footage from Hamburg. Murphy glanced at his watch. "It's nearly midnight. You know burnout is real in this place." "I'll head out soon," she assured him, waiting until his footsteps faded before returning to her work. The pattern was becoming undeniable. 3 cargo ships, the Arcturus, the Meridian Sun, and the Neptune's Crown, had been synchronized in their movements for the past 4 months. Their cargo manifests claimed agricultural equipment bound for South America, but their routes told a different story. Unnecessary stops in ports known for lax security, crew changes that happened in international waters, financial transactions that disappeared into cryptocurrency, before re-emerging as payments to logistics companies that existed only on paper. Elena pulled up satellite imagery from the National Reconnaissance Office database, comparing ship positions with their reported locations. The discrepancies were subtle but consistent. Someone was spoofing GPS data. Her personal notebook, the one she'd started keeping after realizing her digital reports were being ignored, was filled with hand-drawn timelines and connection webs. Old school, but harder to dismiss as the overthinking of a rookie. A memory surfaced. Her professor at the Naval War College, Dr. Sarah Chen, lecturing about asymmetric threats. "The next Pearl Harbor won't come from the sky," she'd said. "It'll come from the shadows of global commerce, hidden in plain sight among legitimate trade." Elena's phone buzzed. A text from her sister in San Antonio. "Still awake? Mom's worried you're working too hard." She typed back quickly, "Tell her I'm fine, just dedicated to the job." She didn't mention that dedication was the only thing keeping her sane in an environment that seemed determined to waste her potential. The Neptune's crown was scheduled to dock in Baltimore in 72 hours. The Meridian Sun would arrive in Long Beach the same day. The Arcturus was already approaching New York Harbor. 3 major ports. Same day. After months of coordinated movement, Elena's stomach turned cold. She pulled up threat assessment protocols, running the scenario through classified algorithms. The results made her hands shake. She needed more data. Pulling up the financial tracking systems, she dove deeper into the shell companies. One name kept appearing in board registrations, hidden behind layers of bureaucracy. Dmitry Volkov. The name meant nothing to her, but when she ran it through international databases, a single hit came back from an Interpol watch list. Former Russian GRU, suspected of coordinating cyber attacks on European infrastructure. "No, no, no," Elena whispered, her mind racing through the implications. She grabbed her secure phone and started to dial her supervisor's number, then stopped. Bradford had dismissed her last 3 reports without reading them. Hayes had literally laughed when Elena suggested implementing new pattern recognition protocols. The timestamp on her screen read 2:34 a.m. In less than 70 hours, 3 ships with potentially catastrophic cargo would be in American ports. And the only person who knew about it was a rookie analyst whom everyone ignored. Elena made a decision that would either end her career or save thousands of lives. She began compiling everything into a single, undeniable report. Not the standard format that would get buried in bureaucracy, but a presentation that would force people to see what she saw. As she worked, the Pentagon's night sounds became her soundtrack. The hum of servers, the distant ring of phones that never stopped, the occasional footsteps of security. This building had stood as America's defense for over 8 decades. Elena was determined it wouldn't fail on her watch, even if no one knew she was watching. By 5 a.m., she had it all: financial records, shipping data, satellite imagery, communication intercepts that individually meant nothing but together painted a terrifying picture. She encrypted the file and saved it to multiple locations, including a secure cloud server only she could access. The morning shift would arrive in 2 hours. Elena knew she had one chance to get this right. She thought of her parents, immigrants who had sacrificed everything to give their daughters opportunities in America. She thought of the thousands of dock workers who would be at those ports, unaware of the danger heading their way. She hit print on her report and prepared to do something that would either mark her as hysterical or heroic. Go over everyone's head and deliver it directly to someone who couldn't ignore her. The first rays of dawn were breaking through the Pentagon's windows. Time was running out, and Elena Morales was done being invisible. Chapter 3. The Summons. The knock on Bradford's office door came at 3:17 p.m., exactly 10 hours after Elena had made the most terrifying decision of her career. She was at her desk, running on her 4th cup of coffee and pure adrenaline, when she heard the commotion. "What do you mean, classified priority?" Bradford's voice carried through the thin walls. "I run this unit. Nothing gets classified without my—" The door opened, and 2 officials Elena didn't recognize entered the tactical analysis room. Their badges marked them as Executive Protection Detail, Secretary of Defense Security. "Lieutenant Elena Morales?" The taller one, a woman with steel-gray eyes, addressed the room. Every head turned to Elena's corner desk. She felt the weight of 20 stares as she stood. "That's me. You need to come with us, ma'am. Immediately." Sullivan let out a low whistle. "What did you do, rookie? Forget to pay parking tickets?" But Bradford's face had gone pale. He'd seen the badge clearly now. These weren't just any security officers. Lieutenant Morales, the second officer, a man who looked like he could bench press a small car, said quietly, "Secretary Madison is waiting." The room fell silent. Secretary of Defense Carla Madison didn't summon junior analysts. She commanded armies, advised presidents, and shaped global defense policy. She certainly didn't send personal security details to fetch lieutenants who'd been on the job for 3 months. Elena grabbed her notebook, the one with the hand-drawn connections, and her encrypted thumb drive. As she walked past Bradford's desk, he grabbed her arm. "What did you do?" he hissed. "My job," Elena replied, pulling free. The walk through the Pentagon's corridors felt surreal. Personnel stepped aside as the security detail moved with purpose, their destination clear to everyone who saw them. The secretary's suite on the 3rd floor. E-Ring, the power center of American defense. Elena's mind raced. At 5:47 a.m., she'd made a desperate choice. Unable to get anyone in her chain of command to listen, she'd used an emergency protocol she'd learned about during orientation, but never thought she'd need. The Imminent Threat Direct Report System, created after 9/11 for situations where traditional channels might fail. It bypassed the entire hierarchy, delivering critical intelligence directly to the secretary's office. She'd expected to be fired, maybe arrested. Not this. The executive suite's anteroom was a study in controlled chaos. Aides moved with urgent efficiency, phones rang constantly, and the air itself seemed charged with the weight of decisions that affected millions. "Lieutenant Morales," a familiar voice made Elena turn. Dr. Sarah Chen, her professor from the War College, stood near the secretary's door wearing civilian clothes and a visitor's badge. "I always knew you'd make waves, but this is impressive, even for you." "Dr. Chen, what are you—" "The secretary called me in an hour ago. Wanted someone who could vouch for your analytical capabilities." Chen's expression was unreadable. "You've certainly gotten her attention." Before Elena could respond, the inner office door opened. Chief of Staff Michael Harrison, a man whose photo graced the cover of Defense Weekly more often than most celebrities, gestured them in. "The secretary will see you now." Elena's heart hammered as she entered the office. Secretary Carla Madison stood behind her desk, her back to them as she studied a wall of monitors displaying real-time intelligence feeds. She was smaller than Elena had expected, but her presence filled the room like a force of nature. "Lieutenant Morales." Madison turned, her dark eyes intense and calculating. "Sit." Elena sat. The office was smaller than she'd imagined, but every inch radiated power. Photos with world leaders, commendations, a Nobel Peace Prize, the artifacts of a lifetime spent defending democracy. "At 5:52 this morning," Madison began, settling into her chair, "you used an emergency protocol that hasn't been activated in 3 years. You bypassed your entire chain of command to deliver a report directly to my office. A report that claims 3 cargo vessels currently approaching our shores constitute an imminent threat to national security." "Yes, ma'am." "Do you know what happened the last time someone used that protocol?" Madison's voice was neutral, giving nothing away. Elena swallowed. "No, ma'am. They were wrong. Cost us $2 million in port closures and nearly caused an international incident." Madison leaned forward. "So before I scramble fighter jets and shut down 3 of our busiest ports, I need to know, are you absolutely certain about your analysis?" This was it. The moment Elena would either validate months of ridicule or prove she deserved it. She thought of the pattern, clear as constellations to her trained eye, the financial trails that led back to Volkov, the synchronized movements that made no commercial sense. "Ma'am, with all due respect, I'm not certain," Elena said, watching surprise flicker across Madison's face. "Certainty is a luxury we don't have, but I am confident that the risk of being wrong about this is far outweighed by the risk of being right and doing nothing." Madison studied her for a long moment. Then she pressed a button on her desk. "Harrison, bring in the others." The door opened, and Elena's stomach dropped. Admiral James Peterson, Director of Naval Intelligence, General Patricia Thornton, Head of the NSA, Deputy Director of the CIA, Marcus Webb, the most powerful people in American intelligence, all staring at her. "Lieutenant," Madison said, a slight smile playing at her lips, "you have 45 minutes to convince the smartest people in this building that a rookie analyst has discovered what our entire intelligence apparatus missed. Your career, and possibly thousands of lives, depend on what happens next." Elena stood, her mother's voice echoing in her mind. "Mija, when your moment comes, stand tall." She opened her notebook, pulled up her encrypted files on the room's secure display, and began, Distinguished colleagues, what I'm about to show you started with 3 ships and a pattern everyone else dismissed as coincidence. Chapter 4. The briefing that changed everything. The Situation Room's main display showed a real-time map of the Atlantic seaboard. 3 red dots blinked ominously. The Arcturus approaching New York, the Meridian Sun near Long Beach, and the Neptune's Crown just hours from Baltimore. Elena stood at the presentation podium, 43 minutes into the most important briefing of her life. The cryptocurrency transfers were the key, she explained, manipulating the display to show financial flow charts. Volkov's network used a mixing service to obscure the origin, but they made one mistake. They used the same wallet address for a legitimate transaction 6 months ago, paying for satellite phone service. Admiral Peterson interrupted, his voice sharp. You're suggesting these are weapons platforms? Not weapons, sir. Trojan horses. Elena pulled up the shipping manifests. Each vessel is carrying containers of agricultural equipment, but buried in the customs paperwork I found inconsistencies. The weight distributions are wrong. The loading patterns don't match standard protocol, and most telling, the crews were all changed in the last 2 weeks, in international waters. General Thornton leaned forward. Changed to what? Unknown personnel with fabricated backgrounds. Every one of them appeared in maritime databases only after passing through ports in Kaliningrad. The room fell silent. Kaliningrad meant Russian Baltic Fleet. It meant GRU operations. Lieutenant? CIA Deputy Director Webb spoke for the first time. Assuming you're correct, what's the play? What are they planning? Elena had spent the last 3 nights working through scenarios. Now, with the nation's security leadership watching, she laid out her conclusion. It's not an attack, sir. It's positioning. Based on the container configurations and port destinations, I believe each ship contains cyber warfare equipment designed to tap into our port infrastructure. Once embedded, they could monitor every shipment, track military logistics, or worse, shut down port operations during a crisis. Secretary Madison had remained silent throughout the briefing. Now she stood. Show me the smoking gun, Lieutenant. The one piece of evidence that made you risk your career on this. Elena's hands trembled slightly as she pulled up her final slide. It was a communication intercept she'd discovered just hours before her emergency report, buried in NSA archives and flagged as low priority. This partial transmission was captured by Signals Intelligence 3 days ago. It's in code, but one phrase appears in clear text, probably due to transmission error. She highlighted the Russian text and its translation. Grandmother arrives for birthday party. So? General Thornton asked. Grandmother is an old GRU code name for embedded operations. And birthday party. Elena pulled up a calendar. Tomorrow is the anniversary of the Baltimore port cyber attack from 5 years ago, the one that was never solved. The room erupted. Aides rushed in with secure phones. Admiral Peterson was already barking orders to the Coast Guard. General Thornton connected with Cyber Command. Through it all, Secretary Madison watched Elena with those calculating eyes. Finally, she raised a hand, and the room quieted. Lieutenant Morales, she said, in 30 minutes I'm briefing the president. You're coming with me. But first I need to know, how did you see what everyone else missed? Elena thought of the months of mockery, the coffee runs, the dismissive looks. Because I was invisible, ma'am. While everyone else focused on the obvious threats, I had time to look at what they ignored. Sometimes being underestimated is its own form of camouflage. Madison smiled, a real smile this time. Harrison, call personnel. Lieutenant Morales is being reassigned to my direct staff, effective immediately. And someone get her a decent workstation. As the room burst into activity again, Dr. Chen appeared at Elena's elbow. Not bad for a rookie, she murmured. Elena thought she should feel vindicated, but all she felt was the weight of responsibility. In the next hours, based on her analysis, the largest port security operation in U.S. history would unfold. Ships would be boarded, arrests made, and a potential catastrophe averted, or she would be catastrophically wrong. 2 hours later, Elena stood in the White House Situation Room as Secretary Madison briefed the president. The operation was codenamed Constellation, a nod to Elena's ability to see patterns among scattered points of light. By dawn, the news would break. 3 vessels boarded simultaneously by Navy SEALs and Coast Guard tactical teams, 43 arrests, shipping containers filled with sophisticated electronic warfare equipment designed to create backdoors in port management systems. A plot that could have paralyzed American commerce at the push of a button, discovered by a junior analyst everyone had dismissed. But in that moment, as the president asked her directly about her analysis, Elena thought only of her next pattern, because somewhere in the data streams flowing through the Pentagon's servers, Another threat was taking shape, and now, finally, she had the authority to hunt it down. Secretary Madison would later tell reporters that the operation succeeded because of exceptional intelligence work by our dedicated analysts. She wouldn't mention that the analyst in question had been fetching coffee and printing reports just 48 hours earlier. But Tom Bradford would remember, as would Sullivan, Hayes, and everyone else who had dismissed the quiet lieutenant with the sharp eyes. The next morning, when Elena returned to collect her personal items from the tactical analysis unit, the room fell silent. Bradford cleared his throat. "Morales, Lieutenant, about the coffee thing, it's forgotten," Elena said simply, packing up her notebooks. "We all serve in our own way." As she walked out, heading to her new office in the secretary's suite, she heard Sullivan whisper to another analyst, "I heard Madison's creating a whole new division for her. Pattern analysis and emerging threats. She's handpicking the team." Elena smiled to herself. From rookie to revolution in 72 hours. But the real victory wasn't personal vindication. It was the knowledge that the next time someone saw a pattern in the darkness, they might be heard before it was too late. 6 months later, the Pattern Analysis and Emerging Threats Division would prevent 2 more attacks using Elena's methodology. The Pentagon's culture began to shift, slowly but inevitably. The old guard learned that sometimes the most dangerous blind spot is the person you refuse to see. And in a small office overlooking the Potomac, Lieutenant Elena Morales continued to connect dots, no longer invisible but impossible to ignore. The rookie who became the guardian, watching over a nation that finally knew her name.